All right, hello everybody. I'm just double checking everything, make sure the stream is up. I see people jumping in here. I'm going to bring Michael on with me in a minute. We've got some groundbreaking news and some concepts to share with you about what's going on. I hope you've all been well. Been away from the stream for a little bit. Just got some things going on in the background, but we're going to be doing some more streams as things are unfolding. I'm sure you're all watching what's happening. I hope you're all safe and well wherever you are. And just before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that I am working hard on creating an at-home martial art program for you all. I've already got a whole bunch of videos up. If you've been following me on Instagram, I've been posting little clips. So that way we can keep active, keep the chi flowing, keep our minds working in a positive direction, make sure we're taking care of our health and our mental health as well during these times. And so check that out. I've got it all over for my patrons, and I've put out a few free clips as well. So follow me on Instagram and my Facebook page for updates on that. And then simultaneous to that work, I'm also been researching, just as I'm sure you have been, on what's been going on. And not that long ago, Michael contacted me and said, hey, I got some good information to share, and I'd love to come on and bring it to you. So without further ado, looks like everybody's coming in here. I'll bring Michael on. And before I do that, just double check the sound is coming through okay on your end. Just let me know in the chat. I just updated a few things in my software, so I want to make sure we're good. Okay, we're good. So let's do this. Michael, there he is. How you been doing, my friend?
Yeah,
I hope you've been. You sound okay. Okay, and you sound good.
yeah.
Everybody says we sound good. We look good. Very good. Let's do this. So, Michael, you sent me a link. We had a doctor that has been speaking out from New York City. There's actually been a
Josh
lot of
Jones.
videos. Yeah, a lot of videos going on. We'll play that video clip in a little bit, but maybe just give me a little synopsis of the information that you've been looking at since our last stream.
Well, yeah, it's every day, as I say, looking at what's happening. A couple of points we wanted to go over. Some will be familiar to the viewers. Others, if new people are, dropping in, we need to contextualize. That'll have to be done repeatedly. I think that even when there's a new update, one always needs to make sure it's contextualized, right? As an astrologer, and I've talked with Fiona, she'll definitely be on to also give us a recap of things in a few days. And as an astrologer, you see, you get your Saturns in Aquarius, you get your positions of Chiron, other aspects. Conflagration is obviously in the works. This whole thing happened under a very special retrograde motion in the sign of Pisces and what have you. So it's not that one wants to catastrophize, right? But one does have to contextualize that those are not just astrological phenomena that need not be paid attention to, right? What's happening is that we have enemies at the gates. So when you contextualize anything that happens in the West, and you have to contextualize it, as I always do, with the fact that is sort of, resisted by many, especially your millennials, your hipster types, anybody with a sort of liberal leaning, even many well-meaning people have forgotten that the West has enemies. And this doesn't mean that you exonerate government, the Western governments, from any kind of culpability. It's not white hats and, black hats facing each other. But having said that, there are forces in the West that also know who these enemies are. And they are, spy masters are in China. We do have Japan as a watchdog. And that's why as soon as this particular fiasco started happening, I was wondering why Japan, well, first of all, what is Japan doing? And then what kind of reports are we getting from Japan and all of that, right? That was just a personal thing. Now things have ramped up. Dr. Jones there, or he's a nurse, I'm not quite sure. But at least he's a person that, given the happenings of the last 2-3 months, he has seen that, and his information is crucial. The video that he's made, like so many others, may be taken down within the next 24 hours. Google seems to not understand that when you leave a footprint leading to censorship, that tells that small group of us in the conspiracy movement exactly where to look now. Thanks very much, Google. But of course, the average person in the mainstream hasn't quite caught the act of the beast. So they think it really is as the beast says, right? The big Orwellian monstrosity tells you it's for your own good. And the ignoramuses of the world go, thanks for letting us know. We won't watch that then. Right? Whereas anybody else who's in the know goes, thanks for telling me, now I can garner, now I can harvest, now I can pay special attention to everyone that you've censored, because by and large, I think the truth will be there. And Dr. Jones's video, he's noticed that him, a few other nurses and doctors, they've noticed, and of course, granted, they're fairly low on the ladder, but that's all the more important because they've noticed that the disease that they're treating, number one, is not coronavirus, and it's something else. People will see the video, his short video. Something that has been told from upstairs, from as high up as the World Health Organization and other bodies similar to that, right? So mostly on the administrative level and above, there's been, the PR that's exactly what it is. And hospital staff have been told to treat this, this condition X. And Dr. Jones is saying condition X is not coronavirus because it has none of the symptoms. And so this then leads to, he didn't say it in so many words, but it's clear to me, and that's why we had to immediately come on and add what he did not add, which is that, that's tantamount then to biological warfare. Exactly within the last few hours, President Trump has declared it so as well. So now this needs to be assessed, because if this doctor is right, you can factor it back, right? You can deductively work it back. And you can say, oh my goodness, then obviously for it to be misrepresented and for hospitals to now worldwide be indulging in malpractice, something, that they're quite used to doing on the aside, of course. A lot of hospital casualties come from exactly that kind of malpractice. Only thing is now it's taken on proportions that are, extremely gross, right? So now that there's actual deliberate and unwitting malpractice that's causing the deaths, that can only happen when the highest administrations are working for China. Now, China, as I've said a million times, is a major threat to the West. And anybody who downplays that is part of the problem. And there have been many naysayers. You've had people going out in the middle of the streets from the Congress talking about how wonderful the Chinese are and all the rest of it, right? And, there are good friends. I mean, this is complete, what it does is it shows you that we have agents within the West who in the media. And now we see them that they must be, this young man who knows nothing about really conspiracy has deduced that, there's conspiracy finally, present in the World Health Organization. They'd have to be, because they're misdiagnosing it. And that is what's killing the patients, not the coronavirus, right? People are coming in with a condition X. The mandate and the orientations in the morning to the doctors and nurses is treated as this, treated as this. They're treating it as this, and that's why people are dying. Then nurses and doctors are going home and crying about all the people that are dying in their arms and all the rest of it. Yeah, look, mate, that's horrible and everything, but they're dying because you are prescribing the wrong cures and you're prescribing the wrong treatments. Now, what does that mean? That means that for months now, people have been looking at the stats for deaths. It's just a waste of time, because if this is the scenario, all of that can be thrown out. All the people have been wasting their time looking at stats of deaths. They don't correlate. It could be 10 deaths or 10 million deaths. If you don't know what the actual cause is, and if it turns out that there's even a suggestion that it's iatrogenic is a word you should look up. It means death by hospital. Then, and that it's death by hospital because nobody there in the white coats knows what they're doing, which is what Dr. Jones is saying. They don't know what they're doing. He leaves his video saying, I'm still working on it. I have no clue. Right. Well, that's a chain then you can follow. We had to come on and talk about this, because that means that all the stats, first of all, can be thrown out because you don't know the actual cause. So it's not a one-to-one, oh, well, people are dying. 10 people died of coronavirus today. 10,000 died of coronavirus today. If you remove the coronavirus nonsense, right, which so many people are telling you it is a fake, and now whoever declared war in this manner, right, biochemical war, thought that by now much more damage would have been done. What they didn't, and that's because they have all their agents in place, right? They took it for granted that it would have the effects that are there on their drawing board it would have. Actually, it didn't have, right? And we should be very glad for that. There's silver linings. I always point those out. One of the silver linings is it is not a pandemic. It's only one in theory, in media terms. That is now even substantiated because the coronavirus is not killing people. Because all the definitions that every doctor in the world knows, coronavirus symptoms, those are not the symptoms you find on the ground level. But it took a while because the guy on the ground level isn't going to suss this, is it? His job is to take orders from his bosses. So that's why it's taken months for anyone on the ground floor to sort of, scratch their head and do a Columbo on this and go, we got to turn this around, which is Dr. Jones has done. Right? But what he's done is monumental. And this is a thing that one needs to really pay attention to, because that video is probably going to disappear, down the memory hole, thanks to Google and Facebook. So what it means, number one, is that there's definitely a biological threat. We'll get back to what that means in a minute. It means the change of all modernity is what it means. It means the change of all history. But on a lesser level, it means that all the stats, God love you. I'm glad to see that the work was done to keep abreast of all of that, but it really doesn't mean anything because there's no longer any one-to-one correlation between coronavirus and any deaths, be it 1 or be it 10 million, right? And there's other points we could look at, right? But the thing is, like I said, the constellational alignments are showing you that conflagration could occur. But in amongst all of that astrology is the fact that there can be a silver lining. But why this will be difficult to understand is because people who are in this movement that we're talking to right now, I don't think are capable of understanding, right, that their government can sometimes be doing right, shall we say, if for lack of a better term, right? I mean, provisionally doing right, right? And this would mean responding to a real threat from a real enemy. And that's as far as I'll go, because if you go any further, the torrent will all explode. And I'm not interested in that, right? I'm only talking to people who have a flexible mind and also can explore this, right? Take it seriously and explore it. If this is indeed a biological threat, well, guess what? The silver lining is it didn't work. They tried to go to DEFCON 1 and it only went to about DEFCON 3 because whatever we were doing in the West happened correctly. Anything to add to this? Because I know you've got some fantastic stuff to add to that question, of the disposition of the government, and we should definitely look at that. But anything to add to this is that what happens if this was already known to the secret services of the West back before, let's just pick 2015, just before Donald Trump was elected. I see some patterning there as well, because when intelligence knows things, it usually does know it many, many years before. Around what's happening at that time as well, and a year or two before, is the mass invasion of migrants into Europe. As I said, there's different theories, and there's different theories, but they all amount to one thing. We said that if there was jungle law, these would be the first jungle gyms, right, to be going around. You suddenly find that they're all armed. Yeah, because it was communist leaders in the West that let them in. They are all disciples of Islamo-communism or whatever kind of communism. China is backing them to the hilt as well. And so one scenario would be that while all of us are dying of that disease, a few years later, this coronavirus or whatever they had on the plan, then the streets would be filled with these militias, these immigrant militias, and they'd just be, butchering us. Okay? So that's one silver thread that hasn't happened yet. The immigrants are still here. Right? And they're servants, they're agents of the communist, the KGB Central. So are most of the media, so is Google, so is Facebook, and all the rest of it. That should be obvious to anyone who's done their homework. Then you say, okay, Mr. Trump suddenly gets in, a guy from nowhere. Is it because he was already made to get in from people who know exactly what I've just said, and were in their own way trying to prepare for it, that if we go to war with China, and that could happen within the next few days, then you're going to need a leader, a commander-in-chief who can basically handle it, kick ass, so to speak, right? And Obama is a communist, so he's not going to do and all the whole thing, right? So they need somebody who will be elected and that he will be in the chair, right? It will be during his residency, his presidency, if something of this magnitude was to happen. So what I'm trying to do is fill in the background of why Trump even got in the first place. Right? Because whoever put him in already had the intelligence, right, to know that this was going to happen. I mean, Secret Service intelligence, spy master intelligence, that China was going to launch. Now, I know you have some caveats on that, and they're fascinating. We'll talk about that in a minute. and therefore their agents in the West were planning this. This was underway, but the silver lining is it hasn't been foiled, but it was semi-foiled, and preparations were made, and that is why you have a Trump. So tomorrow, if it turns out that this very year we go to war, just remember, right, why Mr. Trump gets in and cleaning the swamp and all the rest of it, and then I'll turn over to you now, and then we'll conclude remarks about the aftermath of any kind of declaration of war. Definitely want to explore that before we sign off, because I don't think a lot of people here even remember a war of any significance. And if you remember, in January, America was ready to go get Iran for far less purpose than this, and previous presidents have gone into war again far less than this. Sorry for the few people who died at 9/11. By God, I am. And I agree that we should have mobilized for that action. But my goodness, even that pales into significance with this willful sacrifice of innocent Americans right on hospital beds, directed by communist red World Health Organization or Bill Gates or whoever it might be, and George Soros and a whole lot of them, right? They're willing to do that, then yes, I support complete mobilization. And more so because I know the enemy, what the enemy is, and if the enemy is already mobilized by biological warfare, then I'm afraid that's it. And it just depends what kind of man you have as a commander-in-chief before he, lights the beacon. Or the Japanese say, yeah, China is mobilizing to destroy us, Japan, cries, lights the beacons and says, this is it. And of course, the West will then have to mobilize, there'll be no choice, to support Japan. So this is the situation, as I see it, that we're in, backed up of the speculation of what I think when I saw Dr. Jones's video, and and so on. And we should definitely sign off by even further looking at what might happen. There's two phases that could happen if we attack China. But anyway, David, give us your theory. It was really, really interesting as well about this.
Yeah, no, my mind is racing as you were talking. It's very interesting. You and I have spoken before about how, as you said, there were enemies to the West. And when we say the West, we're talking, of course, about this area of land, but we're also talking about ideals and principles that founded Western civilization. So there's,
I forgot to mention that. Exactly.
Right,
Thank you for making that clear.
And then when we talk about China, we're not just talking about the people of China, although they've been brainwashed and whipped for so long. We're talking about the government of China that is run by who and financed by who and supported by who. So when I started looking at this, I started thinking, okay, because you can totally, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I think there's plenty of evidence to show, at the very least, whether you take this theory on board or not, there's something else going on behind the scenes other than some virus flying around. Okay. Now, I think, as you were saying, Michael, this virus, I think it's real. We don't know a lot about it, and we are getting reports. We're getting mixed reports from doctors. Some reports are coming out where doctors are saying, hey, my hospital is not overrun. I don't have people lined up around the door to get in here. Other places they're like, it's like a war zone. And so we're getting conflicting reports, and it's very difficult to navigate the media landscape because we know what's going on with the media, right? I just put a good clip on my Instagram showing like 20 different news agencies all at one time saying the exact same words. Okay, so we've done this before. So as you were saying, the media is complicit, but let's just think about this. So if there was one scenario that hit my mind as soon as this broke out, and it's probably in my first live stream, was that weeks before the coronavirus hit China, and leading right up to it, were massive protests in Hong Kong and elsewhere against the CCP in China, which was unheard of because they've got that ship locked down so tightly that any kind of resistance, as in any communist regime, as we've covered before, they do not tolerate dissent or anybody, they don't even tolerate it for 1 second. China has most of its internet firewalled off for its citizens, right? So these people were protesting the tyrannical levels in China, and actually Stefan Molyneux went to China himself and did a really good documentary. I don't even know if you can still find it. This was all happening right before coronavirus hits in Wuhan, the epicenter being within walking distance of the only top biological testing lab in all of China, which was a recent installation, I think in 2016 or 17, where they study biological weapons and also viruses. They work on viruses. So my first thought was, okay, could this have been something that accidentally escaped from a lab? and got out? Or were they experimenting with vaccines in China and they were trying to find some cure for SARS or something? They were doing experiment, or governments always experiment, especially these communist governments, on their citizens. So were they experimenting with something? And did that are we seeing asymptomatic responses to that? That was another idea. Then it was, oh no, is this an actual biological, non-natural disease? And from day one, Michael, there's been experts, as soon as the genetic sequencing came out for the virus, there's been experts in Europe and in America analyzing it. And there's been a few that have done reports and videos and stuff where they've been saying this can't be man-made. This can't be natural. This has signatures of a man-made virus. It's not behaving normally. It's not acting normally. It's got a very, very infectious spread. And there's elements in it that just couldn't come together in nature. So I'm sitting there going, I'm not an expert. I don't know how to gene sequence a virus. I'm just going to have to take these guide word for it. But then what do you do when you go on YouTube or Google? Oh, all the fact checkers come up and they're like, no, it's not a man-made virus. Of course, it's just a normal virus. We're going to deal with it, right? And so you go, okay, so maybe China unleashed this on their own population to shut down protest. And then it got out of hand because they don't really give a shit. Maybe it was just like, they're like, screw it. We don't care if there's fallout. Do you ever know any Chinese governments in history or communist governments in history that give a shit about fallout from whatever they do? No. So I was thinking maybe it was just a bit of criminality with a bit of negligence and a bit of stupidity. Or was it actually unleashed, not just in China, but into the world by China or whoever was operating there on purpose? And could there be a steering committee that's above even China? So you could say, oh, this is China attacking the West. But as we said in the last episode, when we were talking about this malicious branch of extremism coming out of the Middle East, and how that has also been pouring into the West, right? They are being used as pawns in a game. Why couldn't China also be being used as pawns in a bigger game? Because I started my first streams by covering something called Event 201, and many people are already well aware of this. This is getting pretty big attention right now. It was one of my most viral videos, and it was just a clip from one of my streams where I was talking about this Event 201, and just a synopsis for those that are new. In October of 2019, some very interesting people and organizations got together to do a mock pandemic exercise of exactly what is happening now. And what they were really trying to do in this exercise was trying to look at information management. How are they going to manage information flow during a pandemic? So they had media people there. It was all organized by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The CIA was involved. Who we know have got many elements trying to take Trump out of there, and many other people. There was the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the Chinese Center for Disease Control, Bloomberg, a whole bunch of other people. Basically, they were the ones that were the partners. When you go to the About Us page, you got to see all the partners of the people coming together to do this mock test in October of 2019 for a pandemic that hit the world due to a coronavirus. Okay. So I thought, whoa, that's a pretty coincidental thing. And then the more you unravel this, and I don't want to break it all down here because I've done other streams on it, and there's actually even people better than what I've done covering this right now, but there's a slew of very anomalous things having to do with this virus. When you were talking about lighting the beacons, Michael, did you see the footage from a few days ago of New York City, the Empire State Building being lit up in all red? Now, red is the symbol for alarm in wartime. And apparently, when they light it up in red, that's a distress signal in the official narrative.
The beacon in terms of sound. Yes, I did.
Right. And they had sound, and then they had the actual tower lit up in red. It looked like the Eye of Sauron, for Christ's sake. Okay. Now, I'm sitting there going, if I'm in New York City and I'm the governor and I don't want to spook all of my citizens, I wouldn't be sitting at the desk going, you know what, guys? Everybody's locked into their homes and they don't know how long they're going to be locked in their homes. And they're all worried about, total societal meltdown right now. And they're all freaking out they might get the virus. Let's give them some comfort by lighting the Empire State Building in red and making it look like this is the end of the fucking world. Okay. So I was like, wow, what a move. What a move. Why not light it up in some nicer color and have an orchestra playing and try to soothe everybody? Why are you working harder on the panic? Okay. And then there was some interesting things where there was a video that went viral on Twitter. where there was apparently some hospital in New York, and there was doctors coming out and loading bodies into a massive 18-wheeler. And there's a guy, shaking with the hammer, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's real, this body's whatever." And I'm sitting there looking at the video, and I'm like, okay, so a hospital in broad daylight, right in the middle of the street, is just going to have a bunch of doctors come out and start loading bodies into the back of a truck. Like, that's not going to cause any panic. They have big bay doors behind the hospital for that shit. They have other, you know what I mean? So it was an interesting thing that it went viral. And everybody started going, from New York. I was watching the stream, and everybody was like, "Oh, Trump is to blame for this," and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, so we don't know what's real right now, and that's a problem. Okay, but we do know that there are some very interesting organizations and people coming together right now to misinform the public in large, to keep fear going, but to keep enough control going, to the illusion of control, to say, "Hey guys, we're managing the situation, we got this." And when you're talking about China, the first stream that the World Health Organization did, and all the streams they've done, the top guy, what's his name? I had a post on it. Anyways, I did a post in my Truth Warrior, Dr. Tedros Adhanom, whatever. He's the leader of the World Health Organization. This guy's an ex-communist. Not an ex-communist, but he was officially involved with communist organizations, okay?
Correct.
And many other globalists. And there's a good video documenting this guy's past. You can even find this on Wikipedia, what he's been involved with. He's the leader of the World Health Organization. The first thing he says is China is to be applauded. They are to be set as the example for the world as to how we're going to deal with this. And every second thing the guy said was, China is just kissing China's ass. And I'm sitting there going, oh, whether this was accidental or whether this was released on purpose and now it's infecting the West, I don't think we should be so buddy-buddy with China right now in terms of the Chinese government. I think we should be a little more speculative at this point, at least. But no, they're getting on their knees for China. So I thought, okay, it's either China or we have the globalists and the what let's call it Big Brother, the people, the architects of control, the people behind the scenes, like you said, who are using China as a major chess piece here because they've been failing. Whether you support people like Trump or these other populist governments in Europe or whatever or not, this side of the fight has been failing in its attempt to brainwash the masses. People have been waking up to the fact that the media is lying to them in record numbers. I even have family that works in Canadian media, and they've been telling me too, and people that I know, that the ratings are falling like you wouldn't believe. Okay, so people aren't buying into it. They've been failing in all of their attempts to try to oust Trump out of office, and he would have been the biggest spanner in the works for any of these plans, whether you love him or not. And all of the celebrities coming out, and the whole thing is all getting thumbs down. It's even to the point where media here is not even allowing you to vote or comment on any of the media publications, which is, come on, it's supposed to be the press. We're supposed to have a conversation about this. So the censorship is kicking in gear. They've had articles coming out from The Guardian saying, oh, watch out for all those conspiracy theorists. They're always at work trying to muddy the pot with this information. And people aren't buying that. So I'm getting the feeling that this whole thing, and we could even take this scenario from if we believed that this was just a naturally occurring virus that's flying around, which I don't believe, or a man-made one, that there are those who are not letting this crisis go to waste. Let's just put it like that, and who are taking full advantage of it. And the biggest thing they need right now is for us to be in a place where we don't know which way is up. This is classic disinformation. I did a whole thing on one of my cult episodes where I had a bit from Professor Anthony Sutton, where he was talking about how these stages of information work, how they work in the media. And it seems like we're getting proven right more and more as the days go by. And then I was looking at the reactions of the governments around the world to the situation. And when we see them putting pieces in place legislatively and otherwise that they were trying to get in before the virus broke out already to try to subvert your freedoms and do all that and do the lockdown anyways under the climate alarmism, which also was starting to fail, you got to start saying, They're just looking at this is an opportunity to go where we were already going. And if there are these infiltrated agents in the West that are working, whether knowingly or unknowingly, I mean, we know it's all compartmentalized on this. Somebody's steering this, somebody's guiding it, and guess who's out on all the major media getting interviewed and thrown around as the new savior of the world, and we're all holding our breath to see what he says about it. It's Bill effing Gates. And so if you have any, if you don't know how to understand this from a deeper level, we can't break it all down. But all I have to say is I am very suspicious. I've had an intuitive feeling. My wife has felt the same thing. We've had many discussions on it, that there is definitely something else happening here behind the scenes other than this virus. And what you've brought forward, Michael, is just another puzzle piece, just like we did in the last stream, that might give some more clarity as to this thing that's happening behind the scenes that we're all trying to figure out and see what's happening. So,
yeah, the response, you're completely correct. The key thing there, there's many key things in what you said, but the failure of the agenda, right, is ubiquitous, right? And those who've been following it like we have, you see this failure right across the board. Even as bad as the immigration influx is, yeah, then we got Brexit. Right? What does that show you, right?
Yeah.
We got even Boris Johnson's election and so on. So there's definite signs. And then we've got the Ann Coulters, we've got the Dinesh D'Souza, all of their activity to try and drug and even destroy morale, which is what Facebook's all about, which is what Google's all about. I mean, we'll this video could be taken down because it dissents. Just the simple fact that you expressed an opinion now, but all of that has only caused them so much blowback that they probably in their psychotic, nature didn't think was going to happen. And so, yeah, now instead of trying to do it incrementally, you get a bunch of snowflakes to buy your cause, that hasn't worked, right? Because remember, we've always said that the socialistic palette is pretty threadbare, actually. I mean, a dunderhead can work it out if you're so inclined. And that it's only the most grossest, ignorant, programmed people who would believe even one single part of it. And they're totally amnesiac when it comes to what even recent world history. But the thing, so given that, if you just took that part alone of the actual failure, despite all the media histrionics and all the rest of it, the media, behind that, the failure of the communist agenda leads to a need to then go for broke and do a coup de grace and try to just take down your enemy. Yeah. The silver lining is it didn't work. We're not all dead. All right? It didn't work, right? So this can often happen. And we don't even need to explore the theories as to why. Because remember, as you said about the Chinese people, let's put it this way then. There's the Chinese people, and then there's that little tiny super elite who really run things and are really dedicated to what we would call, the communist red message. The rest of the people are just completely like, sheeple. And you're quite right. It could be an accident. Although if it was an accident over there that this thing spread out, then when we're talking about them, leveling a coup de grace, the two don't meet. It has to be deliberate at that point. So just to make that clear, this would have to be a deliberate, spreading of some sort of virus, right? But you're quite right. And therefore, this was going to dovetail with what we're going to say later about mobilizing for war. Obviously, before the American ships get anywhere near the China Sea, the China people have their last ditch effort then to overthrow those elites, those super elites within their own, in order to save face, in order to save their country from complete obliteration. We'll still mobilize. Western forces will still occupy the country, but it won't be the World War status. It'll be the next one down, because the Chinese people have had enough. And as what you're saying, they turn out to be true. And in many ways, we also have spy masters within China, you see, who might light those fires and and spread a domino effect. There's all precedents for all of this, by the way. I know it sounds kind of wacko jacko to people who don't know history, but there's precedents for this. It happened in Franco's, France and Italy, and these, in Spain, Franco's Spain and in other places, right? Where damage was done by secret forces beneath the radar. And to this day, they've never been commended for it. And Japan would fall into that category as well. So that would be the China story, that we've got a leader in the West who absolutely knows who his enemy is and mobilizes against him, which will change the fate of the West. Because let's put it this way, very, very briefly. There's been billions of dollars now spent in these idiotic reparations to people who've lost their jobs. The government is even digging deep into its pockets. The Treasury is almost not going bankrupt, but it's way beyond spending what it normally would even think of for these, recompenses, right? Okay, Is it doing that because it knows we're going to go to war? Because in war, what happens? The biggest shot in the arm of plasma for a dying economy is war, especially if it's of massive proportions. So everybody's got their jobs back, and even those who didn't work are now working, and all the rest of it. So then you get two birds with one stone. You get the death of the enemy, right? And I definitely want to talk about the ramifications of that, how that would work out in real time. Because it doesn't just mean the death of Chinese Bolshevik communism. It means the routing completely of even these radical left in our own countries, as well as Islamo-communism. The bloody nose will be given to more than just Bolshevik communism. Putin will fall. Our whole world will change. What will that mean? Right? We should definitely sign off talking a little bit about that. But even before you get there, the idea is that if these people tried to give us a coup de grace, like you're saying, because all their other previous paradigms weren't working, and I look to the astrology to completely confirm that, right? Because that's what I was saying earlier about some of the silver lining in the astrology. It reveals conflagration, but with a cathartic, right, aspect. We already talked in previous shows about the Saturn in Aquarius, very much representing a kind of a Trump-like figure who puts a halt on the capital P progressivism and sort of halts it and starts to go, is a traditionalist, and gets a lot of other people asking, how did we build the West? What are the paradigms? Why are we not using those structures? Why have we been, it's like Theoden waking up from the worm tonguing, right? It's like, why have we been even entertaining, socialistic ideas that have brought our country down? And so right now, whereas Trump had, what the astrology is really saying is this, and I'm really abbreviating, of course, so I apologize for that. But this conjunction, like a Saturn, say, in Aquarius, whereas a kind of a traditionalist or conservative type like Trump would have had a lot of resistance up until this point, the Saturn in Aquarius assists him now. Right? It's almost like the parting of the Red Sea. That simple conjunction, that simple change means that a man like Trump, be he anywhere in the world, in fact, even the world zeitgeist, is now more favored, right, to stamp down on this wild progressivism, which is just the capsule for communism. So there's that to bear in mind. Now, also for those who have listened to my previous thoughts, why we wanted to contextualize things is because those who may have listened to me before heard me completely naysay any rapid red point blasé changing of the status quo. And what I should have said at that time is that with exceptions, right? That is my main paradigm, because that is born out of a close watching of how conspiracy works. But, and I'll say it now if I didn't say it, before, with exceptions. And those exceptions are the world enemy. And the world enemy is the world enemy. There's nobody going to talk your way out of that. China's an old enemy, right? And it's come time to deal with it. And I completely support dealing with it and mobilizing against it once and for all, because of all of the domino effects that it will have to free the West. We'll talk about that more on its own in a minute. But the idea is, was Trump elected because this was already predicted?
Could there be patriots behind the scenes in the military, in the intelligence, in the government that were like, you know what? We've been through how many administrations of these infiltrated agents into our country? We need to fight back. Because you can't look me in the face and tell me that every single person in the military, the intelligence community, the government, every single American working up there is somehow involved in this big giant conspiracy. There has to be people resisting from within. Even during Hitler taking over, they tried to kill him how many times? His own guards, remember?
3 times at least.
Yeah.
That's just the 3 that became historically known. Take it, for instance, that all our other podcasts we do constantly on materialism and the frauds of determinism and all. The silver lining there is that 40% of the scientists in the world are believers in some religion or whatever. Right. Not that I'm saying that. I'm just saying that, yeah, exactly. In that limited description, not everybody buys the paradigm of materialism science. 40% of the scientists are not materialists. So that's completely credible. And I do believe that. There's even evidence. We were meant to bring it out in podcasts down the line, very elaborate ones that I'm working on to show this fact. Because but even besides that point, because of Facebook, because of Google, because of years and years and years and years of saturation bombing on your mind, most of the people listening to us, whether they know or not, are not patriots. What reason? Is because their morale has been systematically broken about the West and its structures.
Mm.
And you're up against it, and I will not deny that you're up against it, right? And so what happens over this drip feed that you've been under psychic dictatorship. See, the long march through the institutions is the long march also through this institution, right?
Yeah.
Which is the brain and the worldview, and it's under attack second by second, minute by minute by KGB International, which is Facebook and Google and all the other media outlets we've got. Obviously, it's going to leave its footprint in your blinking brain. Of course, your morale is going to be practically negligible about Western structures. So when somebody comes along and says, have faith in the leader, he looks like a shill right away, or a disinformationalist. Well, that's the price you pay. Cassandras have always had to pay that price. The guy who, cries wolf ends up, sometimes being told to leave at sunset from at high noon from the city. So, but, as I'm saying, this falls under speculation. Everything we are saying could be wrong. But it's not to, what I'm talking about is that these constellational alignments and the political going on could either be the death of the West, but I don't want to leave it there because I'm not a person who gets into panic. I want to look at like the restoration of the West, and I'm looking for those elements. I have an eye to that as well. I've got the awareness that this, the China's attacks or Islamo-communism's presence and dirty weapons and all of that is, I'm aware, and I've been aware of it for decades of what the threats are to the West, and that the death of the West is sorely loved by all these people that we're talking about, and even other Boogaloo people, right? But the thing is, there's also the chance that their plans go wrong, and that the silver lining is we are able to rebuild the West. For instance, imagine, just very briefly, we did mobilize against China, and the takedown of China in whatever way, a softer way or a more egregious way. It's all up to them, isn't it? And then that follows with North Korea going down, because North Korea is going to back off. Well, we were never in it. We were never in the picture. Sorry, we give up. We're not communists. What are you talking about? And Putin and all the rest of them, they're all cowards anyway, right? And if they all back down and the big HQ is taken down, you tell me what little libtard in America is going to still go, I'm waving the red flag. These are cowards in the truest sense of the word. They'll turn around in seconds, right? They'll act like they were the most purest of the pure and the most patriot of the patriot. In other words, it'll be wiped out. Try to envision then, right? Oh, even though it entails martial law, because the institutions needs to still be funded and operational. When these immigrants have to be deported, that has to be done under martial law and all. So you've got to prepare for all of that. But you've got to prepare for it because it's a hygienic thing. Think then, the silver lining at this point then will be, what will the world, what will the West, what will America turn into when all of that nibbling away at the tree of truth is gone? When there is no more, not only no communism, we've hit the headquarters, but all of these other motherfuckers are wiped out, right? The detergent has been poured. What do we get back to as people? What do white men get back to doing? What do white people, families, right? Start to resurrect within your soul and your heart what the West could be again, because it's been under the worm tongue for so long. So don't you see why I am not writhing in fear and panic in the corner? Because if this is going this way, and evidence of just the last few hours shows us that it might, then you have to hold this vision, right? Which is a Western vision, and it's not shared by anybody else. It just isn't, right? We can't stop that. Wish it was, but it isn't.
Except
so then
though,
you
I
have
would
to
say,
hang on to that sort of social DNA of being able to reconstruct and get back to what families did, what right Anglo-Saxon men have done in the West. That will be resurrected. I'm willing to pay any price for that.
Right. And I would just add to that, if you think about the idea of the West being this concept of it's based on principles and ideas, there have been many who've come here from other places, from other racial backgrounds, that have come and they want to be a part of that new idea. They wanted to be a part of it. Think of the people like Dinesh D'Souza, Bruce Lee, all these people who came from elsewhere to say, hey, that is far better than what I came from, and I would love to come and be a part of this new experiment or whatever. So this will include everybody that is involved, in my opinion, the way I look at it. This will include everybody that aligns with those ideals of freedom, of liberty, of all the things that we've been espousing and talking about. To me, it's regardless of background, although in a funny way, everybody right now, think about it, everybody right now is holding up with their family and their loved ones. Okay, right now they're all quarantined. We're all quarantined. Maybe it's not going well for everybody connecting to their family, but a lot of people are telling me that they're like, hey, this has really given me a lot of perspective to think about where I come from, to think about my roots, to think about those that I love, right? And so in a funny way, this is going to have us looking at ourselves as to, hey, how are we making this world? How are we building culture? How is this whole experiment going? And is there a place to have a larger family than just your immediate family? And what does that look like? And all these questions you're bringing up, Michael, what I think you're getting at here is that we're going to get a point where if we can drop the ring into the fire and eradicate, the Sauron or whatever you want, just as a metaphor, okay? Then what's the world going to look like? We're going to have to rethink everything. But what you've been saying for so long is that we don't actually have to rethink it, because the great geniuses that you've been rolling out endlessly on Unslaved and all your work have already nailed the way you actually put the blueprint out of how we got to Western civilization, that it became the envy of the world, the principles, the philosophies, the ideals, going all the way back in ancient history. And so, we don't have to rebuild the wheel again, do we? Even if everything collapses and there's a big war or a big thing, or
it'll be a
whatever.
joy.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be a joy. It will be the thing that everyone in their secret heart wants to do, because there has been decay, and those decays happen through internal enemies, which is right there in the in the Oath of Allegiance, and also from external enemies.
Right.
These are very simple, and there's no end of enemies. I mean, this should be axiomatic. We've had them in the schools. Mm-hmm. They're teaching our kids for the last 50 years with this John Dewey socialistic stuff. People who warned were shot down and weren't listened. Neil Postman, Alan Bloom, many others I could mention. John Stormer, right? So I believe this is the delight. You see, one of the biggest constellational shift right now suggests of exactly what we're talking about. That truth is going to come out. That a lie cannot live forever. It cannot skulk in the darkness anymore. The light is changed. And Absolutely. These lies, right, and these programmings, let's say, which is what it is, because it's been, a long march through the institutions, that's going to break down. And so I looked at that to say, I'm very, very familiar, with catharses, that it leads to a greater thing. And what I want our audience to do is to have that in their toolkit, so they're not, beaten from pillar to post with the changes of the magnitude that might be coming. Because either there's going to be a soft attack on China, and give them a bloody nose, and that'll take down communism. The soft one being that the Chinese help in the process, and I'm very much open to that. They owe us a favor. Or it'll be the hard version in which we go and do the business, right? And I'm behind that. So the thing is that what that will mean, though, is that people in the conspiracy movement have to adjust their view, like you hinted, on the status quo of the government, and who's really running it inside. But really, if you, instead of screaming at, the camera right now, screaming at the screen when I say things like that, it's no more different than two groups who have always been fighting each other, who, when a third or fourth group, come in to mess with you, the two so-called enemies suddenly get together real quick. It's sort of along those lines. And it is something that is indeed, plausible and probable.
It's so well. And just for those of you out there who maybe don't quite understand what Michael was getting at there, I'm sure many of you have watched the Game of Thrones series. I know it's very popular. People message me about it all the time. I've seen it. There's an interesting storyline in this series where the whole thing starts out with this common threat of these White Walker beings that were basically going to storm this massive wall that was always put up to protect this kingdom, right? And it kind of shows in the beginning of the season that, this is the big threat that's going to be coming throughout the entire show. And then the rest of the series of these shows are all about the internal battles between different families, all fighting for power of the throne of that place that was being attacked by this common enemy. And the whole thing builds up to the fact that people that were killing each other and killing it was like mafias, all slaughtering each other in the streets and, doing the most horrible things to each other, in order to survive, had to come together, bury the hatchet, and fight the common enemy, or otherwise they would all be equally wiped out. So just to give you some fiction that's been sort of modern for people to understand what Michael was saying there, we may very well be seeing that. So we have to be careful about being attached to information that we read 17 years ago and thinking that that's just always the same.
Even if it's
Things
true.
change. Yeah, even if it's true.
Even if it's true. Because I'm one of them, right? I'm not telling people to do anything I wouldn't do myself. But there are external threats. And a sane person knows how to, weigh it all up. Because that's what I see, is that there could be two phases. It's going to be within a few hours. It's going to be within a few days that we'll know what's going to happen. When a top leader, the leader of the state, the leader of the country says, we've just been biologically attacked, he's not going to climb down the next day and go, I didn't mean it. Come on, guys. Exactly. That's tantamount, or I wasn't thinking. It's tantamount to a declaration of war. And that's why we called you and we had to get this done, to again contextualize. So when I spoke of, the normal Illuminati plan is always gradual, work in the night when people are asleep, but there are exceptions, and this is the exception, right? So it's not that I'm backpedaling, because I totally believe in what I just said before. But the thing is, this had to be added as a footnote, that in a situation where we are openly attacked by psychotic people, well, they're not just your Illuminati who are normally in the West. Do you think I don't know there's an enemy here who's been doing exactly what I've said they've been doing, gradually, right? It's called a totalitarian tiptoe, or whatever you want to call it, right? Of course, they are still there. But that group's tactics have also to change when more psychotic people, who are almost at the end of their physical lives and certainly at the end of their political careers, and every machination they've had has not really worked to the degree that it should show up on their charts, meaning it's a failure. There's been many, many instances in which people like that go rogue. And then they unleash, a coup de grace situation like this, but it also can backfire. That's what I think. I don't think it was, I'm sure they were experimenting with drugs. The proximity of Wuhan to those institutions is just no coincidence. They probably did experiment to a degree on their own people. But remember, if they were to spread a virus, don't you think that those elites would already be immune to the very virus they're about to spread? And that would have to be over maybe a period of 10 years that they've immunized themselves. And so one way or another, this is an attack on the West. Whether it was an attack to completely create genocide, and we'd be lying all around, every one of us would be lying around dying, or it's more this botch job that they've done, an inept version, it wouldn't really matter. In both scenarios, it is an attack. It is a declaration of war on their side, and then, right, there has to be a counter, declaration on our side. And therefore, the shifting of the future and the destiny of the West is obviously not gradual, right? So my words previous could have put people to sleep a little bit. And that's why I wanted to make sure, that it's all laid out very, very clearly. Because if this type of declaration is made, and let's just get into that now, get your comments. In the domino effect, if China is taken down successfully, don't you see that North Korea, right? Don't you see that other enclaves of this kind of communism, don't you see that the Islamic version of it, right, it has to completely fold up, because they'd be destroyed once the West is actually mobilized against a definitive target. That is communism finished throughout the world, and that alone, you see, is very promising and hopeful. And it's also, we're past time. Actually, we're past time that this should, have more people should be educated on this. And the leftists had to work out that every time they open their mouths about anything, even on a state level, let alone a federal level, more people are woken up to their illusion. We've said it so many times before, but George Orwell's quote, which should be promoted to one of the most important quotes ever in the history of the world, was the quote in which he said, the left are the worst advertisement for themselves. You see that every time they open their mouths. So in one way, a lot of people are aware of what's going on, right? And then you cannot deny that on the secret government, deep state level, right, this pestilence changes the dynamic, right? It doesn't mean that, they've all become automatically angels overnight, but they have recognized what the real threat is. Oh, and the one thing I forgot to mention, which is probably the most important, if the external enemy is taken down, right, the communist enemy, what does that mean for all those agents working inside America? It means that they are gone. They go up in a puff of smoke. Not one will want to sit at their desk and keep putting out more liberalistic crap, right? So whether the people in New York or all the leftists in America, they'll not be able to do anything about it. There's not going to be any hard, soft way that you can, ameliorate it, that you can fudge it. It will mean the complete ending of their paradigm. And if anything, the default position for them will be to, people will maintain a sort of a classical liberalism, but it will not be militant. It will not be active. And as I said, over given a period of time after the military rule, right, martial law ceases, and that'll only happen when things get back to some sort of normality. After massive deportations, after the crackdown, and the arrest of card-carrying communists or pinkos in the media. This will all mean this, by the way. And it's all good. Let them go to the wall. They've been nibbling at our civilization for decades. They have absorbed and propounded the most preposterous, destructive, evil, ideologies you could imagine. Look at Sweden. Look at that fucking place, right? What a fiasco. How could anybody do that? How could anybody leave themselves open to that? Well, there's going to have to be payback time. And America is no different. But the detergent means that will be the end of what we know as these, as radical socialism. It will have died its death. It will have breathed its last breath. And there's nothing negative about that. And then the reconstruction takes place. And I think that's the meditation for people. Whether this comes to pass or it doesn't, try to start to envision in your mind what that will mean for you so that you can rekindle it, because it's all there. Our ancestors did it before. You were talking about the past earlier on. You're quite right. This is what I mean in tangible terms, though, not some abstract, so what happened? No, a real formation, like almost going back, and the constellational alignments support this, going back to almost, zero, going back to build again. If a house of cards falls, you have the will and the strength and the fortitude to put it back together again on all fronts, starting with education, starting with economy, and all of the rest of it. So that's the vision that one should have, if they're going to be heroic. The rest is, well, then obviously you crawl away and you shiver to death, and the enemy wins that way. I have no problem with the takedown of communism because I've been studying it all my life. My dad was a top Marxist. His ideology was totally psychotic and, irrational. And all his mates, even though they had the top jobs and smoking expensive cigars and living like luxury in the West, all they could do was spit at it, right? All through the years of my life. And then studying the actual paradigm with the help of great people like Ralph Epperson and others as well, right? And J. Edward Griffin. So I know it through and through. It's something we want rid of in this world. So if you have to pull the scab and you have to, go on certain rations for a while, and you got to stay a little bit on lockdown for a while, don't just come up with bizarre, irrational ideas, which is KGB Central, which is love you to have, which is breaking the morale that you have on the West. That can so easily happen and probably will. Nothing I say is going to change that. But, it's my duty that even if only one person is listening to this, I have to speak. You have to. I can't just say, well, nobody's listening, so I'm not going to speak. Unfortunately, I'm in a position, morally, where that just is not an option. How can you say you're heroic and you love heroic, forefathers, and then not be heroic yourself?
Exactly.
My God, that just can't happen. Yeah. So you step out and you say, hey, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could rebuild America? Look at California. Who the fuck? Do you know who runs that place? Look at Canada. You don't want to change up there? You must be half mad.
We're dying.
Like, we have to have a purging. This country has gone to war for less. This country has fought civil wars for less. This is like worse than getting rid of the British Empire, because actually the parliamentary system, the parliamentary system locked in a few years after the Declaration of Independence. I believe, and others believe also, that had America's War of Independence taken place a little later, we'd have a parliamentary system identical to England. So half the things that people think in America was against King George and all of that, and believe me, there were things to be against, but actually it would have been a lot less of a fiasco, and we'd probably have not a republic, a republic democracy, where we would have almost the identical political system that was in Britain and came to bear in Britain, all right? So we've got much more in common. We've got much more in common than we think. This fight against world communism has to be thought of as absolutely, beyond that. And therefore, the sacrifices that may need to be made, I hope that there are no sacrifices. I hope this goes off, China just capitulates. If there's a declaration of war, they damn well get the message and back right off. But either way, Western forces will have to occupy China for the duration. There's no other way. You couldn't trust anything they say, so it would have to be, we'd have to quarantine their country for goodness knows how long, because they are the enemy and they deserve it. Now, your point, absolutely, that you cannot have Western leaders allowing, right, and these are communists, allowing waves and waves of immigration in to substantiate their communist purpose, and do it around the time when Trump comes up, because his rising is a counteractive to that. You can't have what you're saying is happening in America with the Bill and Melinda Gates foundations and all the other ones. You can't have all of that And then you can't have this happening. And there's been so many preludes to this, right? As you say, other viruses, other things going on. You just mentioned several. You can't have all of that without an China isn't arranging all of that on its own.
Exactly.
Right. But that is because we have to widen our whole concept of this communist international is. And you and I have done podcast after podcast with that exact thing in mind, with Kent Clisby, right, and John Sasser, Chuck Sasser, and Chuck Morris, and others as well, hoping that this will come to bear. Trevor Loudon, you wouldn't imagine the effort, putting book lists together, highly selected, all read by myself. There's not a book on there that hasn't been completely read. And there's actually a lot more, you see, that I haven't read, so I don't put them on the list. Everything on that list I've read and know is a masterpiece, so read it. And there's some that are there where, I don't quite believe, I'm not as leftist as those people, or I'm not as politically correct, or I'm not as Christian, let's say, right? There's a couple of books on there that I put by ardent Christians. I don't support that. But the other work that they have there is absolutely, you see, and I've always been like this. I haven't let my bias or prejudice stop me, right? But this is the opposite of the liberal. Everyone by now should know who the fascists really are on all levels. So when we're fighting communism, we're fighting fascism. We fought it before. We fought other forms of socialism before, right? So get ready for the fight. And if there's a fight, I don't want to see no trembling. I don't want to see anything but complete, faith and conviction, because what we're fighting is the deadliest enemy that has been raging since the time of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, right? And the world conflagrations that happened in the 18th century, right? That have led to all of this. And there's even darker forces behind that, which in the domino effect might in fact even be taken out. There's even more elite forces behind, and we might compromise them. There may be a day when we actually really can get to, dealing with them, but you've got to do it in stages. So all of these things that I am seeing, now I hope people can share my perspective. I'm seeing it as the first fraying of the edges of the world disorder. Right? Because it is evil. And I've said for years and years and years, the evil has within it the seeds of its own destruction. The more evil you are, the more you wave a flag to nature to say, come and get me. So that's why when I see things like this uproar, I don't see it as something destructive. I see it as something cathartic, right? In which now that tipping of the balance, is going to happen. And of course, to substantiate it, you look at your numerologies, you look at the symbolism, you look at the zodiac. And as I said, one of the biggest constellational shifts actually shows that the lie is over. The lie is finished. And that there's going to be an act of destruction, very similar to what the tower struck with lightning represents in the tarot. But it is that the false has to tumble, has to fall. And the forces that bring it about create an incendiary kind of luminescence in which you get to see the truth and you sort of wake up from the spell yourselves. And of course, I think, was it you who mentioned it before, or was it Ronnie Landis? Before a detox, right? Before you have complete health, there's this detox moment, isn't there? And you can feel very poisoned and very smothered and all the rest of it. So watch out for that effect. Don't get thrown by it, because again, you don't want, the enemy knows all this. Try to sit through it cathartically and regain your senses. There's a lot of catching up to do. We've offered time after time on Enslaved the procedure of how you let that be easier for yourself than harder. And it will mean swallowing some bitter pills. But what of it? We're getting rid of we could get rid of, I'm hoping we do get rid of, the worst pestilence. People talking about Luciferians and Satanists. I'll tell you exactly where they live. And the time has come, to rid ourselves of it.
Well, and I mean, you, Michael, have labored also to show that this is an ancient battle. And I'm thinking about this in terms of Lord of the Rings, because I've been going through the films and reading from the books during this past time off, just to gain some insight into what C.S. Lewis was trying to use this metaphor that he told in that story as a way of talking about how evil works and how the dynamics work. And
Tolkien, right?
Tolkien, sorry. Yeah, Tolkien. I've been reading C.S. Lewis too. I got a good quote I'll share in a minute from him. But
he says the same stuff.
The same stuff, right? And it's the idea that this is an age-old battle. And this was something you said, I think, in your first Atlantis presentation. You were like, this is an age-old battle. And it's probably even cosmic. It probably goes even beyond this planet where we live. But here we are, and we have, you went back even to ancient Egypt, and you discussed the idea of ancient cults and the Atonists and the Ominists, and how there was an overtaking in the historical period in Egypt where the good ideas and concepts that brought liberation, freedom, and prosperity to those people was also overtaken by a different ideology. And then you can follow this battle all the way through history, and you come up to the Jean-Jacques Rousseau's and all of that, and you can show it, but it goes back even further. I even went into an ancient communist cult that existed in the Middle Age period, where they attempted to overthrow even the feudalist system, and it was even worse than the feudalist system, for Christ's sake. So go check out that. I think that was in episode 4 of my cult series. But you've been talking about this as an age-old battle, and we're using the terms today, socialist, communist, but these are, like, they were created by the Illuminati and the Jesuits and all that anyways. This is all, so even that's the enemy that we're identifying with those words today. That's the guise that they're wearing. But we know that there's an ideology that is running through behind even that. And as you said, this might be a domino effect. So when we're dealing with any thing with China, or and we're talking about the Chinese government, I actually think a lot of the Chinese people are going to rise up and help with this, based on what I've been hearing. But we've seen that there needs to be an unseating of at least those public centers of power, in the sense of, like, you've got these World Health Organizations and all that kind of stuff. But then beyond them, there's other forces at work as well. So in the end, as you're looking at this cosmically, would you say that, when you were talking back in the day when everybody was thinking the world was going to end in 2012, remember that? And you were always sitting there going, no, a phase is going to end and a new phase is going to begin. And that phase is going to be the age of revealing. I mean, for crying out loud, 2012 up to today, if that wasn't an age of revealing, I don't know what is. I mean, more and more is coming out, and it's getting faster and faster and faster by the day. And so when you come in and you're talking astrology, and people might be like, oh, here we go with the astrology, just hold on a sec, because your predictions were accurate. And here we are living in a time where the lie is starting to come untethered. Would you agree that this is age old, and at the same time we are indeed living in a grander cycle where this has to happen? And in order for that to happen, you got to pull some teeth, and you got to be uncomfortable, and there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable periods before we get to a point where we can rebuild.
Yeah, it'll be our countries against them. We'll mobilize against them. And at the very most, all it will happen is martial law. And that's not a bad thing. That just means that everybody will be fed. Everybody will be, there'll be order and stability. Of course, if Google are all arrested, the elite, and the YouTube is elite are arrested because, they're under martial law and they're known to be communist agitators. That doesn't mean that the YouTube and Google won't still be functioning, right? They'll be staffed by people who have the technological expertise. But it's the elites that will be taken down. Same in the press, you see, and all of that. You're quite right. In 2000, on public radio, I think it was, I pulled a card, and it happened to be the tower struck with lightning for the next year, prediction for the next year. Then came 9/11. And so one does put their trust in it, not because we're idiots, but because we've worked with these arts a lot and see that they come true. And not only do they come true, but they help to sharpen your own keys of decipherment. They help you analyze. They help you open up critical ability. So they're good on multiple levels, not just the did it come true stuff. That's what the layman thinks is so important. But there's so many other importances about this, and they help with your intuition and so many other things we could say. To answer your question about higher forces, it's the black nobility, and where it becomes more archonic, and it does, because all satanic forces like the black nobility are religious, right? Right. You're quite right to speak of this, because there is a point that most people do not know, that politics becomes a religion. And when we say that, we're not talking about the Baptist church at the end of the street or the Seventh-day Adventists or whoever it might be, right? Right. We're talking about religion in the capital R way, beyond Judaism, beyond Christianity, any boogaloo, Life of Brian stuff that has come up. One thing I should add also is that any form, it goes on from what you're saying, any kind of attack that's happened through these generations on the West is not only external attack. We have allowed it to happen. So when I'm looking at what the constellations are saying, I'm looking at this sea change that will happen from within, because you don't get rid of the things, just in case people missed it. We are as culpable as the enemy, because we've allowed them to enter into our minds and eat of our table. So the type of dynamics that I'm talking about when I see a change are far more profound than any Alex Jones or anybody else is ever going to speak about. Half the programs you and I have done already are transcending that level. It's not just political stuff. It's a radical remasculinization of the whole of the West. If that has to happen by the death of the old West, what the hell? I'll put the coin in, because I'm my disposition, my temperament's prepared for that. I know a lot of other people aren't. That's why we're talking this way, to fortify people, to get them to understand. The system that you've got under your feet is completely rotten. It's made rotten also by your own attitudes, right? Of which communism and anarchism, leading back into the past, as you're suggesting, the philosophies of psycho like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and anybody like him only got read by and made bestsellers, right? Because of a bunch of lunatics who led to the reign of terror, right? A bunch of younger people, students, and so on. And it's been the same pattern over and over again. As we say, socialism's narrative is very threadbare. If you study it, you'll soon get on top of it, and you'll realize what the hell is going on. Like many in the left have. Do you realize that most of these Dinesh D'Souza, not him specifically, but a great many other, David Horowitz, for instance, Mark Stein, they were all card-carrying liberals before they became who they were? There's that proof. Probably even Tucker Carlson was, for goodness sake, and so on. So there is this defecting that happens and this dissension from within because it is so bankrupt. But getting back to the point, we are complicit in our own dining with the enemy. And that has to stop. That's what immunity really is. When you gain back your sovereignty, you say, I shall not allow the enemy to my table, right, anymore. I did before, and I rue the day, because it poisoned, us by its very presence. And we're not going to allow that today. And that could be one of the changes. And that is also a sign that I see in the astrology, right? A restoration on the individual level in their concept of sovereignty. It's backed up even by that lesser constellational change of Saturn and Aquarius, by the way. But back to the black nobility. By the time that politics is traced back past Jeffrey Epstein, up, bit higher, and you get up to a certain weird place, between the cloud line, and you're going, don't like the smell of what's up there. Listen, you've already moved from anything to do with politics and political parties, and you're already moving into religion, right? It's priest to the Illies time now, mate. And you can just tumble back like Jack and Jill down the hill if you don't know this. And at that point, after you pass through the clouds, it says like the darkness does one good thing for you. It sharpens your eyesight. You have to have a kind of seeing in the dark. Well, once your eyes are acclimatized and you're able to go through into those dark corridors, you start to understand that this religion is Gnostic. All caps. Even the street level Gnosticism, which you find, whatever, whatever. But when you start moving up, you start discovering really what Gnosticism is. And then you go a little bit further, right? And now you start finding about set worship and atomism and comets. And, this thing gets pretty wild. You think down here it's chaotic and wild. Jesus Christ, that's the kindergarten level, right? And when you even go higher than that, there's a very good chance, and I did write about this in my first work, the Atlantis book, that there's something else, right? There's something else even on an archonic level. And the most I've ever explored it is in the Atlantis book, and that was bad enough. I had to put the pen down, so I'm not going to visit this anymore, right? There's something very weird at the very highest levels, right? But coming down a bit, it's the Nazarene sect that was communistic in the beginning, right? The Nazarene sect of Judea, Parthia, right? They're really a female Illuminati, but let's not get into that. This extremely important and powerful group, right? They created what was, they blended with the Nazarene church, which is the Jewish sects. And they were always very liberal in the first place. They were fighting against Rome. From amongst their coterie, guess who our guest is tomorrow? Ralph Ellis, the expert on this. From their coterie, they had a Judas Harlequin character, right? Saul Josephus Flavius, who under many, many guises started to realize that he could make a breakaway sect, a breakaway religion from these Parthian, Judaic, right? Atonist, set, whatever you want to call them. They're really, we just call them the fourth sect, right? So Paul Josephus, under the guise of Saint Paul, laid the foundations for the fifth sect that later, goes off and becomes papal Christianity, which is still in the world today. We're doing real good. It's a lot of progress in history.
Vatican stuff, right? The Vatican, the Jesuit type guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can go and visit them. You can take a selfie right in front of them. right? Yeah. So we're still in the trap of this dragon. But the liberalistic sect that has opposed them in the dark, that's behind the Jesuits, as you said, they formed the Jesuit order. Jesuit order, can you believe it, are worker ants to the people we're now talking about, just in case people didn't catch it. Your so-called Knights Templars, the highest nobility in the West, worker ants to the group we're talking about. So it takes a lot to be able to see behind that wall, right? And Freemasons and a lot of Sabbateans, right? They're all acolytes of this group. This group don't operate on the level we do. We've talked about it in terms of private and public worship. I'll be asking Ralph about this to extrapolate further, this theory I have, right? But these black nobility have a private form of worship that is undisclosed. And that really answers, your point. Because to get into disclosing it takes us way, way, way. I've written about it on the Female Illuminati website for those who are interested. But the thing is that what has happened is that by and large, a lot of the public forms of worship, religion with a small r, the religion, where you club each other over the head type of religion, that is a smokescreen that has elements of this other private worship scattered in it. Like sun worship, comet worship and all that. It's all there, but it's in an absolute state of, Alice in Wonderland kitchen. It's a total mismatch. And what the hell, they know we're all irrational. We'll bite down on it, and we have, And then the only response to it is some sort of pathetic atheism, another bankrupt paradigm. You see, so look, that's where we are. So we're under attack on multiple levels, right? Meaning, it comes back to the point we're making. Yes, there are bona fide objective evil, deeply evil forces out there. But you know something? What I've been saying from day one of my career is those people would just disappear in a puff of smoke if we had 5% immunity, if we knew what evil really was, if we had our act together, right? And we don't. So what I'm seeing in the heavens now, to be, blasé about it, right? Is that there is a chance now for a radical revolution on that level. Now, the domino effect will mean it'll be the taking, to everyone in the world, it will look like it's the taking out, they'll be dancing through the streets like they were at the end of Hitler was licked. Okay, we can't stop that. But behind that level, there's something moving seismically deep down, deep plutonically. Pluto, one constellation I forgot to mention, it's one of the bigger ones, is the planet Pluto is moving through the last few degrees of Capricorn. So anyone listening to this who has a modicum of understanding about astrology will go, okay, got it, that's it. Right? But actually it is it, but it's also a larger plutonic force that's happening in a bit of a larger way, like you're talking about. And you know who the first people are who know that these constellational ones are moving? Are the evil ones. They're way ahead of, we'll never find out, right? They already know years before, right? And they're acting in this way that you alluded to in the beginning of your commentary, where there's a fear and there's been a failure. And the Dark Lord's going to fucking eat them alive bit by bit and then use their bones as a toothpick. And they know that because the forces you conjure, if you don't give them and you don't abate them and you don't placate them, guess what? The unholy eye turns on you. Evil implodes. That kind of dynamic is what's happening. So we should be sighing relief. We should be able to let go of baggage. We should be celebrating. We should be saying, when can I dance in their bones? Make sure I'm invited to the party. All right? So this cognitive shift is very, very important. So don't get distracted by unfamiliar astrological jargon, because that ultimately is what it is. What I'm talking about is the psychological underpinnings. When I say Pluto, I mean on the deepest strata of the psyche that can no longer tolerate lies, that can no longer tolerate your own lies against yourself, all the self-deceptiveness of our societies, all the idiotic, parasites, all the pirating, all the extortion, all the confiscation. Don't let the fact that even though our governments are hugely criminal organizations, right, and are a problem, yeah, but we'll deal with them in time. Get with the gig so that the real evil can be taken out, right? And then we'll have the fortitude and the willpower, and nothing will stand against us. We've been so, the Svengali has been working for such a long period of time. Long before communism itself physically manifested in America, which you can give a date, Woodrow Wilson, whatever, right? It's important to when you're studying the history of it, we've done that on programs. We're going to continue doing it. But never forget that none of that evil would ever have worked if there wasn't some loose screw in us from the beginning. We're going to have Kevin McDonald on to dive into that question. There's elements of his work that I find bear upon this, you see? And I want to ask him questions. We want to see what he's got to say about Puritanism, about Christianity, about, the Constitution. There was doors left open here. And, if we were ever to reconstitute things, we'd have to close those doors. Maybe it's not right for all religions to be allowed a freedom in the country. And on from there we could go. It would just get more and more controversial as if I was to continue talking. And I've learned to keep my mouth shut on certain issues that are in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that have also been taken as even the doctrines of liberalism, you see. One has to be very cautious. So we won't go there yet. But the thing is that there are paradigm shifting things in the truest sense of the word. And the paradigm shifts always take place when the mainstream paradigm is turning to jello. So materialism is jello. Economic theory is jello. Education, that's long gone. That isn't even jello, right? And so on. And so yes, not because of our self-deceptiveness, but because of some other action, right? Something far more archetypal. Communism is finding itself ready to go down with the Titanic into the whale shit where it came from and where it belongs. Get behind it, folks. Light a candle on your cupcake, or half of a cupcake as it is now. Fine. Eat the candle. Have a little smile in your heart for what's going to happen. Right? Don't be worried about it. There's something immense on the horizon, and your fear and your panic is only serving the enemy, the beast, because it tunes into that, right? We're talking. That's what we mean about a little bit about Gnostic archonic activity. It will suck your fear. Well, it's not getting any of mine. It's not getting any of mine because that's helped it in the past, right? It's going to see one big fucking finger is what it's going to see, and a big smile. Your days are over. You're busted. And, people are hearing the sound of my voice know this. There's a lot more people than me have been waiting for this in this movement. Followers of G. Edward Griffin and other people who've been waiting for the day, and have grown up reading the great patriot work. Well, this is it. Get the scales removed from your eyes because, this could be it. And if it happens, don't be trembling. Get out there and join it. Communism is your enemy. China is your enemy, right? Islamo, whatever, is an enemy, right? And it's not only foreign, it's here. Right. So, and if you are able to mobilize against it, then mobilize against it. You have to have that fortitude of masculinity. Don't get feminized. Don't get prevaricating and listening to the script of the enemy, which has survived because of our own inaction for far, far too long.
Yeah, well said. It's like that scene when the king in Lord of the Rings, he's saying, a day may come when the courage of men might fail, but it is not this day. And you have to take heart those messages of truth. It is not this fucking day, no way. And no matter what's going on, we know something's going on. We're all sitting here in quarantine, biting our nails, trying to figure out what's going on. From day one, I've been trying to advocate in my own psyche, in my family, in my friends, and on my show that, yeah, I'm here speculating on my channel, trying to figure out what's going on, and we're bringing different people on to bring all the theories to the table, and I know it's uncomfortable, and I know you can sit there and accuse me of scaring you even more than the media by doing that, but the fact of the matter is, the danger is real. Whatever danger, we can argue about what the danger is, but the danger is real. Our reaction of fear is the choice we make, and even if you feel fear, there are exercises and there are things you can do to empower yourself to deal with it. Don't repress it. Don't drown it with drugs and alcohol. Don't do, keep everything under check and all of that moderation and things, but try to come back to that place where you can find courage. And that's why I've been also mixing up a lot of my content with bringing very positive, empowering quotes from some of the greatest martial artists, the greatest thinkers, greatest writers on courage, on tough times. Our forefathers through centuries have gone through far worse than this. Even though this seems to be all coming to a major head and it's a historic moment in time. I mean, just watch that movie 1917 and see what the 16-year-old of those days were doing. All those boys throwing themselves in the ditches and fighting and dying in the millions. And you hear the sounds of we can't even imagine it. And then just take it all the way back. All the what Georg Griffin say, all history is palace plots and conspiracy and overturning empires and battles and internal struggles and political chaos. And like human beings, we're forged, all that blood, all those genetics, all that memory, just as much as that ancient trauma you've been talking about, Michael, flows in us. Yeah, but so does the strength. So does the strength. And you got to feel it. And sometimes you need your back up against the wall to really feel alive, to really feel strong. I've been talking about feeling strong, and people are sitting there in their apartments and everything's normal and they can get access to Starbucks anytime they want. They're like, what do I need courage for, Dave? I'm good. I'm satisfied. Well, now all that's gone. So now it's time. Now it's time to connect to your courage. And you are built for this. And you came in this time. I believe it. You came into this time, in this place, in whatever it is, April of 2020, to experience what's happening now and what's about to happen. And it's not all bad. It's not all bad. Regardless of what it is, it's not all bad.
No, half the constitutional alignments I'm looking at are actually surprisingly not bad. They tell you that there's upheaval, but they say that on the basic level is the rekindling of a heroism that has long been missing in the West. Wow. And so all the other narratives, fade into that. They fall back into this. That if you don't have the fortitude, then the maggots will be there. You see, if the meat isn't fresh, you can't stop the parasites from coming. Half the things that we know that we call malignant, right, that we call evils, only got to exist because of fudgy thinking or false starts. We don't need to belabor. People know what we're talking about. It's like in your own personal life, your tolerance of a vampiristic kind of person. Yeah, they don't go away of their own kind. You've got to tell them, out. We're done with you. Bye-bye. Don't care what you think. We're tired of being sucked off. So it's really as simple as that. But it is it's a little bit off. It's a little bit weird because it's happening deep down, right? The restoration, let's just put it the way, the impulse for the catharsis is quite below the threshold. And that's why you have to use these divination arts like astrology to, feel what's happening so that you get orientated right. Whereas other people, it's just running around like Castrovalva, it's just running about like a gremlin. You don't know, where the center of the earth is. You know what I mean? And yeah, bringing back, see, for every problem that could exist, no matter what it is, the solution lies inside yourself. But we become so flabby that we don't use the critical ability to say, not only do I have a problem with this person or this issue that I'm going through in my life, but we're less and less aware now that we contain the secret of it inside. Remember we were talking about that anecdote about positive thinking as opposed to positive action? That's just one iteration of it. Half the time, if you positively act, right, and just act for the sake of acting, it will transcend any positive thought, which will never get you anywhere. It'll just, be the roller coaster ride round and round again. And one of the shows we were talking about DIY, and we weren't doing it tongue in cheek. Do you know how to carve a throwing star and a target at a hay in the back garden? Get on with it. Throw them stars right at the head. Right? Get out and do something. Forget the positive thinking. Take a piece of metal, carve out a throwing star, and start practicing. What reason? None. Get a bow and arrow, right? Go out, start practicing. Any reason? Nope. Because there's something about the childlike curiosity, right? And definitely, as we more seriously mentioned, the idea of getting back working with tools. Half our flabbiness, half our impotency, especially in the male, is because we're no longer using tools. It's all this on the computer and whatever else. And you're an exception because you're working with tools every day, in the weaponry, right? Jesus, just get a stick, folks, and go out there and play Robin Hood. I don't care what it is. But the thing is, there's all sorts of components to this. Heroism is not really a matter of positive thinking. It's more about positive action. It's grounding yourself, right? It's really doing meditations that ground yourself in the earth. And also meditations that take you back to your childhood, meditations that examine the problem and not make it a problem. Instead of running away from your pain, I saw something on Facebook, in order to escape the pain, go and learn something. I was ready to write underneath it, yeah, from the pain. They're still talking about it. Don't you see? They're still talking about, go learn something. Oh yeah, so I'm still running away from it, you chumps. I will go and do something and learn about my pain. I want it to educate me. I want to know what it is. I don't even know what it is. I just keep feeling this thing, but I have no idea what it is. I go through agony. I go through depression. I've never sat with it. I've never let it teach me. I've never welcomed it. I've never said hi. Never greeted it once in my life. And then I wonder why it doesn't go away. And the older and older I get, the more pessimistic and down and broken I become. Yeah, because you've never turned to this extreme teacher, this master teacher who holds the key of enlightenment in his hand and said, welcome in, tell me more. That's not heroic. That's the absolute antithesis of heroism. Look at the teens now. For this, you deny them some microwave grub and they shoot the parent. Right? You say, you're not going to go out with that guy or girl, not for a year or two, and they're butchering their whole family. Right? What is that all about? Right? Because it's too late to teach it now. Right? There's no manual at that point when the person has been reduced to just desiring and not having any reason to understand, delayed gratification or whatever it might be. And so the great archetypal lessons of life are always being learned at all time. You could have Armageddon. We could be speaking right now in the middle of World War. Do you know something? It has no bearing on the lessons that one has to learn. Right? You're going to learn the fundamental few archetypal things about human existence, right? Existentially. No matter what kind of, circumstances is happening outside. But the true existentialist, and I've been saying it for years, understands that we manufacture, right, social, political problems in order to escape learning anything. And that dynamic has to be explored. And it cannot be explored in an hour. It cannot be explored in one book. It's a lifelong thing to which I have committed. And I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I'm the one who knows the benefit of doing it that way. So do you think that some little powder puff coming up, telling you you're this and you're that? Yep. Have a nice day. Right? Because I'm extrapolating and exploring why that dynamic exists and trying not to get distracted by all the other voices out there. Because it's fine tuning to really observe. Why do we prefer chains of gold and chains of iron? What is it that we have in our mind that wants to evade selfhood? And then, that takes you into areas that we couldn't possibly explore here. We've been doing that on Enslaved for day one, and I've been doing it for 30 years. Slowly, meticulously discovering what it is about self-deceptiveness that causes, it's like the archetypes that are happening now in the sky are like this. They're touching the wound, right? They're touching the wound, but they're saying, does this wound kill you? And if this wound hasn't killed you, then it's Nietzsche's old story about that which does not kill you makes you stronger. That's where we are right now. We've been deeply wounded, right? Our minds, our psyches, our bodies are deeply wounded. But if the death knell hasn't come, if we haven't died of those wounds, then watch the fuck out, right? It's the man with no name coming back out of the pit. I thought we shot him 50 times. Yes, not, right? That's the hero. He's maimed, he is wounded, right? But he re-emerges because he's cracked it, he's learned it, right? And sometimes this happens even on the political or world scale. But if you lose sight of the archetypal posting and the mirroring, you're finished. The enemy doesn't even have to take you down. You're already taking yourself down in fear. But if you understand where your boat is moored and you understand, right, these existential issues, it fortifies you. And like you're saying, then substantiate that with other practices, breathing, grounding, right, working with tools. When I say these things about, making weapons and going, I mean it. I'm not speaking metaphorically, actually. I speak metaphorically so many times and euphemistically that they probably think that I don't mean it. I mean, get a pointed stick and go out there and, stab it into the earth. Go and do some sand raking. Go and look at the trees and that, analyze what they are. It'll help ground because it's of nature, right? Go out and run around in the rain naked. Whatever's your preference, you know what I mean? But do it. Wallow around in the mud. Whatever it's going to take to get you grounded, right? Eat mud. That's a really good one. I think I'll do that myself. Right? Eat. I don't care what it is, but this is the time to make sure you're very, very close to the reality, right? Very, very phenomenologically close to reality. That'll help because otherwise it's like this, right? It's based on the premise that you can catch the disease, not the coronavirus, the mental pathology of your leaders in your identification with them, right? So what's happening now is there's something going on, in the above the glass ceiling, a meltdown. Right? It's like in those James Bond movies. Right? There's one, I can't remember the name of it, where they play this incredible game and it's called For the World, for the domination of the world. Yeah. And it's all done masonically and they have to play this sort of video game, right? And if you watch that scene, right, It's with Klaus Maria Brandauer. That's all I can remember is the German actor who's opposing Roger Moore. It has everything we're talking about, because in order for the Roger Moore character to win, he's got to go through a pain threshold of such severity that you might as well be being tortured, because the handles that he's holding to manipulate the game are electrified. Right? And he keeps coming back to sit down, even though the enemy is winning time and time again. And every time he loses a point, there's more electrification going through the controls. So he's literally burning up, right? And he stays there. And he goes through the pain barrier and he defeats the Illuminati enemy. Now, what does that mean? Right? And there's a big checkered floor. I mean, they're laying it on. So, they're even dressed in Masonic colors. What he's telling you is that there's a pain threshold to bust through. And as I said before, you'd never get the enemy that's powerful. If you meet a powerful enemy, it's only because you're even more powerful than they. So there's something about tapping in, right, to that wound. And if that wound hasn't actually killed you, then it becomes your greatest ally in the field of battle. It's the blue flame of anger, And America has been flabby for too long. It's allowed all sorts of false religion, false politics, stuff that's so transparently false. And, there's great men out there who always was telling us that, but, they weren't on the bestseller list. And there's been purgings. We could be purged. This video could be taken down. They're taking down already videos where they say it's false information about the coronavirus. Actually, it's mostly truth, but they're taking it down. Even this now totally breaches, right, what they want in the narrative. So don't you see a big brother at all? You can't see that there's somebody. When did I give the right to Google to say what is truth or isn't truth that I want to hear as a listener? I wanted to hear those videos. Who steps into my life to say, no, we're going to decide for you, and you're not going to call that a tyranny that needs to go? You're going to sit there and say, oh, well, too bad, damn it. Nothing can be done against them. They're too damn powerful. Sorry, that may be your way of thinking. It's not mine. I say put a bomb under their ass. Right? Nobody is going to tell me what goes into my body. They don't tell me what to eat, and they don't tell me what to wear. Well, they're not going to tell me what is injected into my bloodstream then, are they? But we'll end with a video, but just to make it clear why there's a context with what Dr. Jones is saying there, or Nurse Jones is saying, and that is this. It has now come out, after a long period of time, because that's what it would take for people on the ground floor to smell a rat, that the coronavirus is not what's killing people. The hospitals are killing people. That's a setup that's been going on for years. Malpractice and iatrogenic death is one of the leading forms of death in hospitals, so they're not really changing their agenda, even in this instance, right? But that aside, upstairs administration, themselves controlled by even higher forces, has told the people on the ground floor to treat these illnesses, no matter what they may be, as you diagnose it and you prescribe for it by that it's coronavirus. That's killing people. So that's, just if you could just embody that, now you'll know. Don't go anywhere near the hospital, and if you do, don't let them diagnose it on that level, because they're going to kill you. Or at least, people over 65 are more vulnerable, but there's others as well. So this piece of information in this video is vitally important, because now the lights are starting to shine. Said on the first program, hey, I do trust some experts, they'll tell you what's going on. In this case, it's boots on the ground, took a bit of time, but now the nurses and the doctors are saying there's something wrong. We can't report it upstairs, because then they tell us to shut up, or they tell us to go home on sick leave, right? We have no power, but through the internet, through the media, through the internet, they're able to come and share with us these things. But they've tried to turn to their administration to say, I think we're treating it all wrong. Of course, slapped down right away, or you can even be assassinated if you try that. I wouldn't recommend trying that. This is a total top-down thing. But guess what? It leaked out, as it often does. And then we are the ones who need to then extrapolate and expand upon it. And what it means is that the Chinese are responsible for this. They thought that they could get away with it and would work to a DEFCON 1 level, because they've got so many agents in the West, in Italy and everywhere else, in America and Britain, that they had no idea that it actually wouldn't work. That probably wasn't even factored in. So the fact is it hasn't worked, and even now, as of the last few hours, I feel the truth about it has really come out. So then that, we've already expanded then on where that might end up, because and just as I was forming these thoughts, the president himself is out there saying, yeah, it's a biological attack. You can't take that back tomorrow, right? So that means we're on the verge of war. But what my message is, so let it be, because it'll be taking war to the right enemy. And I'll rest on that for now. With all of very much aware of all of the alternatives, very much aware of the variables to that. I'm aware of that, but at the same time, this is my sharing. This is my 2 cents. So again, we'll leave it there. Maybe if you can have final comments. My part is done.
Well, it's incredible, Michael, and I'm really glad you came on to share this. I My mind is still going. I think there's so much to dissect from this, and I can see it in the chat. People are having some good discussions. So all I can do is I'm just going to read off a quick quote that I promised from C.S. Lewis that I think is really good to keep in the back of our minds as we move forward, and to kind of maybe give some context for how we got here. And then I'm going to leave and close this stream with this video from this doctor from New York City. And I'll say goodbye now. So thanks to everybody for tuning in, for your comments. Positive, negative, I value it all. And we'll be doing more as things go. This is just another thing to bring to the table as a possibility. And it's something we have to consider deeply. So this great quote from C.S. Lewis, he says this of tyranny. He goes, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive of all. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." This was a quote I was saving for my Cult of the Medics episode, which eventually I'll get to. I'm just sort of collecting data from this coronavirus thing, because the evidence of what I was about to present from the past about these medics and these cults and the hospitalers and all that is actually being played out on the main stage right now. So I'm going to leave it with this video, and I hope you all stay safe and well. And if you do want to learn more about how to play with weapons and objects and do all that kind of stuff, and look in your garage and find some cool objects to work with, as I said in the beginning, I'm actually doing an online course for you all to help you with that, with your kids doing that stuff. So if you want some advice on that, I'm doing those projects. So stay tuned for more of that. But let's end this stream